Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our program. My name is Helen Liu, and I'm the Programming and Partnerships Manager at Cary Library. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Cary Library Foundation. Their support enables us to bring programs like today's event to you. This program is being presented in partnership with Lexington Climate Action Network, LexCan, and the public libraries in Ashland, Bedford, Belmont, Marlborough, Maynard, Needham, Tewksbury, and the Randall Library in Stowe. Today, Kate Schapira, author of Lessons from the Climate Anxiety Counseling Booth, How to Live with Care and Purpose in an Endangered World, will share methods for living with our emotional responses to climate realities and using them as guides to connection and action. This program is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please submit them to the Q&A or chat, and Kate will answer them at the end of the program. Copies of the author's book are available for purchase through Bookends in Winchester. I'll add the link to the chat, but you can also borrow a copy from the Minuteman Library Network. Kate will be joined by Marcia Jens of Lexington Climate Action Network, who can offer concrete ways to work and care for the living world in the Lexington area and beyond. Before I pass the mic, I just wanted to mention that Cary Library is partnering with LexCan and Lexington Community Farm for a film screening of the documentary Common Ground. So join us at Lexington Community Farm on September 18th at 6:45 p.m. You will need to register, so you'll find all those details of that event on our calendar. Now I'm going to pass the mic to Kate and Marcia Jens of LexCan to introduce themselves. Welcome, Kate. Welcome, Marcia.
So my name is Kate Schapira. I'm going to share my screen with you if that's all right while I talk. We live in a technological world. Thanks again for being here technologically with all of us. So I wrote a book called Lessons from the Climate Anxiety Counseling Booth. And this presentation I'm thinking of in terms of finding our paths for a livable present and future. So I've been listening to people talk about their climate emotions for about 10 years at a climate anxiety counseling booth that I invented, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. And some stories from that as well. Marcia, do you want to just say a word about who you are?
Sure. We're very delighted to have you here tonight, Kate. I've enjoyed starting your book. I came to LexCan by way of being a social worker, and when I was taking a break from my practice, I realized I really wanted, my anxiety was what led me to want to work more on the environment. So I started with recycling, helping get recycling in the schools and composting, and also started with LexCan. I've had really the great opportunity to work with a number of organizations in Lexington, and I'm really looking forward to tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So a quick word about kind of what the booth was like. I started it myself because, kind of similar to what Marcia was saying, because I was feeling very weighed down and distressed by what I was learning about climate change and the effects that it was having on land and water and also other human people. And I would try to have these conversations with people that I knew, and they would act like maybe I was overreacting, or it wasn't that serious, or maybe there was something wrong with me. And I was like, that can't be true, that can't be right. But it was very lonely to have that reaction. And I thought, well, you know, is there a way that we can talk about this? Can I make a way for us to talk about this? My husband is a cartoonist. We have collections of Peanuts by Charles Schulz all over the house. And Lucy has that little booth that says psychiatric help 5 cents. And I thought, what if I made something like that and set it up in a public place? So the picture that you see there is of me across from the big bus station in downtown Providence, where everybody changes buses, gets off the bus to go to school, gets on the bus to go home from work. And I just sat up there and I thought, okay, well, let me make a little space, a little shape for people to have these conversations in, and we'll see if they want to have them. If they're not worried about climate change, what are they worried about? Let's talk about that too. So that was in 2014, spring of 2014 that I did that. I think this picture is from a little later, maybe 2018 or so. And yeah, the answer was yeah. The answer was yeah, people were anxious, they were angry, they were upset, and they were also feeling extremely isolated and alone. The thing that I would hear over and over again would be, well, I'm only one person. What can I do? People talked about not being able to afford air conditioning, and so it was too hot for their son to, for his son, this dad I talked to, who I think about all the time, it was too hot for his son to sleep, and his son had some intellectual disabilities and kind of couldn't understand why this was happening, why his dad didn't have time to take him swimming because his dad had to be at work. He was like, he loves the water and I can't take him swimming. So this was like a father who couldn't be the kind of parent that he wanted to be and knew that he should be and knew that his son deserved because of climate impacts that were already affecting our city. I think about the guy who came up and he was like, oh, you know, I have a boatyard, but there's only 140 people employed. Like, is the state going to even do anything for that? Like, am I even going to have a business in 5 years? Are we going to be underwater? What's it going to be? Like, feeling really like, you know, not just helpless to the impacts on his own business, but also to the people who were working for him. What was going to happen? Who was he going to be after this boatyard was gone? I think about, gosh, who else? Who was I talking the last time I did this? People who, you know, recently I've been hearing a lot from people who they just seem very tired. They almost seem defensive. Like, why are you asking me to think and feel stuff about this? Like, things are already so hard right now. I'm doing everything I can. And again, there's this sense of like loneliness and isolation. A lot of the things that they list are things that they just like, you know, do in their house or do in their, you know, immediate environment. And those things are really good. But one of the things, but they're lonely. It can be lonely. So one of the things that I want to do together today is to think about ways to make the things that we do more collective, which some of you may already be doing. I don't know your life. We're also going to be doing some grounding exercises together for your own climate anxieties to share with others. You can do that informally, like, hey, let's just do this together. Also, you can do it as part of a meeting or programming. I work with people in Warren, Rhode Island, who are trying to build a little bit of climate and community resilience. And we do a grounding exercise at the beginning and end of every meeting. Mostly we're talking about other stuff, but we take this moment to kind of like, all right, this was a lot. Let's kind of like just feel it together for a second. Marcia is going to share with you some specific opportunities for climate action in the Lexington area. If you're calling in from somewhere further afield, that's totally fine. Maybe that can give you some ideas for things to look for, or even things to start where you're living. And then finally, and maybe even most importantly, hearing and being heard. You're definitely not alone with whatever you're feeling and whatever you're doing to meet the climate crisis. With that in mind, one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is watch the chat because I will be inviting people.
And that actually is like a wonderful reminder, I think, of something that's important about this work. Telling people when you join in climate action or any kind of collective action, telling people what they can do to make it work better for you. Like, we are in this together. It's totally fine. So again, I really appreciate that. And I'm glad that we paused and worked to straighten it out. So once again, I'm going to ask that people, as we go along, watch the chat. There's going to be a couple opportunities for you to speak into it, including one that's coming right up. And when that happens, I want you to also use the chat to listen, that is to read the other things that people are saying, because that's the place where you all are going to get to talk with one another. And some of you, I think, live near enough to one another that you might end up working together. Some of you might already know each other. And that's actually way more important, I think, ultimately, than hearing from me. So we're going to start with one of these grounding exercises that I do in the meetings. I sometimes do them with my students, other groups that I work with. So I'm going to read through it and describe it, and then we're going to try doing it together. So you're going to think about a climate impact that's active in your community. And that could be something small, like things bloom or die off at a different time. It could be something kind of wide ranging, like more people are moving to the area. I want you to imagine it vividly with your mind's senses and notice what you feel. And then, you know how when you're walking next to the road and a car comes toward you, you kind of hear the sound rise up and get louder, and then it drops and gets softer? You're going to do that with the image or the feeling that you just brought up. You can close your eyes, unfocus them, let that strong feeling rise up and get intense, then let it drop like the car passing. Then we're going to do it a second time. And at that time, don't hurt yourself, right? So if this is going to hurt you, don't do it. But if it's not, you can also tense your muscles if you want when you let the feeling rise up, and then relax them when you let it drop. And then we'll open our eyes and look around us. So think about that climate impact, whatever it is, big or small or medium, but something that affects the place where you live, work, or play. Whatever you're feeling about it, let that feeling rise up and intensify, and then let it drop and subside. I'm going to do it one more time. This time, if you want, you can tense everything that is tensible. Your hands, your wrists, your feet, your butt, your eyebrows. Let the feeling rise up and let it subside, and relax your body. So now you can open your eyes if they were closed, or focus on the screen again if you wish. And then whatever that climate impact was that's active in your community, go ahead and share that in the chat if you would like. Just put it right in there. You don't have to, but you can. And again, this will give the other people in the community a chance to recognize, oh, this is really happening. I'm not alone in noticing this. Drought, high temperatures, loss of insects, disappearing snow in winter. You can all see that, I think, on my screen. Other impacts that people are feeling, please share them. Hotter weather, storms and wind ruin the summer. Too hot to work outside. Stormwater flooding with rains. Storms are worse. More refugees, absolutely. Here too. Flooding in Vermont, yep, really bad there. So you can keep adding stuff if you want. Thinking about how this affects the land and water where we live. And then, we talk about climate anxiety. That's in the title of my book. I think if I had known that it was going to become a thing at the time that I started it, I probably would have called it something else, because anxiety is just one of many emotions we can feel in response to what we know about the changing climate. And emotions don't always fit into neat boxes. There isn't like a name necessarily for all of the things that we feel. Climate action also covers a lot of ground. We don't always know how to talk about this stuff. Yale Climate Communication does a ton of data collection on people's attitudes about climate change. And more than half of the people in this country who answered this survey either rarely or never discuss global warming with their friends and family. Even though 70% of those same people recognize climate change as a reality, and just under half of them have been harmed by it personally or consider it harmful. That's a gap. I see that as a gap, right? I was right when I started doing this. People don't necessarily know how to talk about what they're seeing and what they're feeling. And so even just doing that, like you all are doing in the chat right now, is doing something a little more, a little beyond what has been done so far. And then several studies that I've seen suggest that emotional distress about environmental change and loss can both provoke climate action and be addressed by climate action. So what you do feeds back into how you feel. This is another opportunity for you to speak into the chat. When you hear the words climate action, what do you think about and how do you feel? What do you picture? Do you picture something that you do, something that somebody else does, and how do you feel about it? We've got a couple more anxieties as well. Loss of pollinators. Legislative work is slow and confusing to follow. Janet, I hear you. That is so real. Necessary on every level. Yup, 100%. Climate action. What do you think of? Guilt that you're not doing more. Really common. We'll talk about that a little bit as we go along. Empowerment. Yeah, where does the strength of our arm come from, right? How do we find that strength? Again, feel free to keep adding. And again, I want to remind you, go ahead and read the chat as well. But also, let's do that grounding exercise one more time. My mom is fond of saying, what you practice, you get better at. I hate it when she says that. She's right every time, and I hate it. And then there's also a quote that's like that sounds a little deeper from Thomas Merton, who was a monk and philosopher. And he said, if you bring forth what's inside of you, what you bring forth can save you. If you don't bring forth what's inside of you, what you bring forth can destroy you. And I think the point that he was making there, as it relates to what we're talking about here, is the way that we feel is going to come out, whether we do it on purpose or not. But if we do it on purpose, if we do it with intention, if we do it with care, it can save us. And I think it can help us save each other. So let's do that exercise one more time. Again, close and unfocus your eyes. Look at all those climate impacts that people are listing in the chat, or feel that guilt, right? That sense of strain, the frustration with legislative processes, the feeling of overwhelm that Liz is mentioning here, worrying that Marta shared a worry about like really not knowing what to do, inefficacy of structures, right? And governments, oblivion of neighbors, congressional gridlock. Feel whatever you feel in response to those realities. Let it rise up and let it fall away. And now do it, if you're able, do it with tensing your muscles as well. Let it rise up and tense. Let it subside and relax. And there are physiological reasons, which I've had explained to me, but are kind of boring, why that does something for you. But I want to stress that you can do it anytime. You can do it in a meeting. You can do it when you're talking to an annoying relative. You can do it when you're trying to work something out about what should happen next. You can do it when you're watching the news. And it is a way to just bring forth what's inside of you in order that it can save you rather than destroy you. So another thing that we can do in the face of, especially, I would say, some of this stuff that people are raising, the frustration with large governmental structures, is to ask ourselves, where are we in our community's web of abundance? This is an exercise that's from my book. I'm going to read just a little tiny bit of that to give people like a little bit of a sense of how that has worked in Providence with a couple of people that I know. But while I'm reading, you can also, here are some questions that you might ask yourself and the people around you about what you're good at and what you could contribute to your community's web of abundance. So this is from the second chapter of my book, which is called The World Belongs to Everybody. Not long after our conversation at the counseling booth, Eva Amanda Agudelo came up with a partial answer to the aforementioned question, how will we feed everyone who needs food? By leaving her job at the Rhode Island Food Bank to found Hope's Harvest Rhode Island, a food rescue and distribution nonprofit. Hope's Harvest coordinates volunteers to gather fruits and vegetables that participating farms don't think they can sell to their usual customers and distributes them to hunger relief agencies. Throughout the first 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, they delivered 505,353 pounds of fruits and vegetables. In Hope's Harvest's second summer, Amanda took me with her to pick up and distribute a donation. At the Olneyville Food Center, we sorted through pallets of vegetables, extracting moldy squash, yellowing kale, and cucumbers with slimy spots. What I learned from working at a food co-op and then at the food bank, Amanda said, is if you wouldn't eat it, you can't ask anyone else to. Olneyville is one of the main places you live in Providence if you've been displaced from elsewhere, including by climate change-fueled flooding, fire, and drought, and by climate-changing industries like mining, logging, and industrial farming. There's an elegance to food rescue, a satisfaction. Hungry people get to eat, the food gets to be food rather than waste. Farmers get paid for produce that they otherwise couldn't sell, and volunteers learn more about where their food comes from and who grows it. Hope's Harvest and its network of partners do work as various as convincing foundations to support the project, stooping in the hot sun, and planning the season for extreme and unpredictable weather, one of climate change's biggest threats to our food supply. Since I plant crops, I can see, Rhode Island farmer Blia Mua said when I told him I was writing about climate change and asked what he'd noticed about the growing season. Global warming makes the climate change. I think we should do something about it. The world belongs to everybody, each and every one of us. Blia's stand is on the other side of the library lawn from the climate anxiety counseling booth at the Sankofa Market, where I've been doing the booth since 2015, among tables of vegetables grown and products made by people who live, farm, and work in and around Providence. Many of the vendors have roots in Africa or Southeast Asia, and the foods they grow provide whole neighborhoods with the taste of home. As part of the West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation, Sankofa stabilizes prices and doubles the value of SNAP to buy produce. Affordability is also a factor. People come back every week to get honey and peppers from Teo, callaloo and sweet potato greens from Charlotte, and bitter melon and beans from Blia. Between helping one customer sign off on her SNAP check and confirming for another that yes, the cooking greens and white streaked gourds are all organic, Blia told me that he'd been farming in Providence since 1989, soon after he arrived in the United States as a refugee. If you're new to a place, he said, you can't be sure whether what you're seeing is normal. But if you stay somewhere for a long time, and especially if you grow food there, you can tell the difference between the variation from year to year and the more extreme changes that persist. I wanted to hear from Blia as a farmer, and also as someone who had had to make a life in a new place. I was a little soldier, he told me. He protected downed American pilots during the Vietnam War. This allegiance got him into a refugee camp in Thailand when the war ended, and then into the United States. It's hard, he said. It's hard when you move one place to another. It's not the place that you move when you want to go, but you say, I don't know. I don't know what's worse going to be. Is it going to be bad or good? Climate change brings that uncertainty to more and more of us. Will we have to go? Where will we go? What will it be like? Who else will be there? Will they make us welcome? When I asked Blia what he'd tell people who have to make transitions similar to his, I learned that he already does this all the time. He sponsored cousins to come from Laos, walking them through survival needs like finding a doctor and avoiding racist neighborhoods, and also through pleasures like visiting national parks or the shore. He was the first from his family to arrive and had nobody to teach him. It took me like 20 years to learn something, and I'm being sponsored to my family when they get here, because I want them to know how to get a job, how to save money, how to go to the bank. If you've had to make your home elsewhere, as Blia did, you can be a guide for family or friends who are doing it for the first time. And if you have a lasting familiarity with the place where you now live, you have other kinds of knowledge and skills to share. Finding these in yourself and finding other people whose knowledge and skills complement yours is the next step on your path of meeting the anxiety of climate displacement. Mutual aid, identifying and sharing what you can spare, people to people, is the antidote to hoarding. So that's something that I often ask people to think about when they're thinking about their climate anxieties, when they're thinking about the possibility of taking climate action, especially if they're thinking, man, these large systems that we deal with are so hard to wrangle. You got to do that. Somebody has to wrangle with those systems. But there's also other things that you can do right on the ground to help people survive and support people who are trying to make those kinds of changes in the systems that we're part of. The other thing that I wanted to think of together is that we can collaborate with the land and the water as well as with each other. I know that some of the, we were just talking about farming, and I know that some of the climate and environmental action around Lexington and in the area has to do with regenerative farming. There are also probably conservation things that people are doing. There might also be some other things that people are doing that I don't even know about. Maybe Marcia will tell you about them. But I want to do another little exercise together to try to kind of think about that, how that works. So if you have a notebook or a notes app on your phone, maybe get that ready because I am going to ask you to write some things down. And I'm going to ask you to envision a part of the place where you live, something about the place where you live. Let that vision fill your mind's senses. So place yourself on a street corner or out in a garden, maybe on the bike path or on a trail in the woods, maybe near the power plant or the sewage treatment plant. Maybe there's a place in the river where garbage tends to wash up. Wherever you are, place yourself in that landscape. Smell the smells in your mind's nose. Hear the sounds in your mind's ear. Think about the light and the temperature at a specific time of day. And then I want you to think about, what could this place receive from you that it would like to have? If it's dry, could you water it? If it's full of pavement, could you rip up the pavement and plant it? And I want you to envision the change in that place if you made that offering of time and skill and effort. What if you did share water with this place? What if you planted it up? What if you did some work to restore the soil? What if you worked with a fire practitioner to do a controlled burn? What if you invited people there to enjoy it? And try to feel those changes with your mind's senses too, even if you haven't experienced them in that place. Try to hear the sounds of returning insects or flowing water. Try to smell the smell of healthy dirt in your mind's nose. Try to hear the quiet if there's fewer cars, or the sounds of voices if it's people gathering together in a place where they feel safe. When you've got that kind of fixed in your mind, maybe take a moment to write down a few of the things you felt and imagined. You could put them in the chat, or these could also just be for you to keep with you, either one. Pamela wants to know how to help clean and protect the Charles River. And Pamela, I feel like I just saw something that would help you do this. I'm not going to try to go find it now, but I know it exists. I know it's out there. I've seen it. I've seen a website that is exactly about this thing. So I think you can be assisted in it. Other things that people saw and felt in the changed place with their mind senses, you're welcome to put that in the chat, or you're welcome to just kind of keep it for you. So that kind of thinking that I just invited you to do, there's quite a bit about it in my book, actually, about how to do that. But there's also a lot of other tools and books out there. I know Marcia is working on a list of stuff to share with you, but that's both local and kind of larger and more general. Here are a couple of tools that people have created. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson has a project called All We Can Save that's about connecting people with their possibility for climate action. And she asks people to use a worksheet like this to find the place where what brings you joy, what you're good at, which is what we were thinking about a moment ago, and then what work needs doing. Where do all those things overlap? And that joy part, I think it's pretty important. We're all tired. We're all overworked. There's all kinds of stuff to deal with in the world. Every time you turn on the news, you want to turn it off again. There needs to be something in this work that doesn't just feel like work, that actually feels good, whether that's being outside or connecting with other people or connecting across generations, or like using your body in a way that's physically satisfying to you. Finding that place where, like, even though it's something new, even though it's work, it's also fun. And then this my friends Josephine Ferrarelli and Megan Kallman wrote a book called Conceivable Future, which is about parenting or the choice not to parent in these times. If you are somebody who's like, oh my God, like my children, my grandchildren, the children I don't know if I want to have, the children I have had, please read this book. It's so good. It really reframed the way that I thought about this issue, because it asks us to think about climate justice as a reproductive justice issue, meaning people deserve to be able to have kids if they want to have kids. The problem is not in people having them or not having them. The problem is in the conditions that make having them a risk to them. And this chart is a little collage that Josephine, one of the authors of that book, made. And she asks people to think like, am I a big yes person or am I a big no person? Do I like to try to stop stuff that's bad? Or do I like to try to capacitate people for stuff that's good? So I also often find this really useful when I'm thinking about, like, do I want to have a fight or do I want to build something? The title of the book is on the bottom of the thing. It's conceive. I'm putting it in the chat. I think I am. Am I? Oh no, because I unplugged my keyboard. Now I'm putting it in the chat.
I put a link in the chat but it's, to the Amazon link to the book, Conceivable Future Planning Families.
Thank you. Marcia, if you're on the board of an HOA, you are like doing the earth, trying to do this. You are doing the earth's work. I take my hat off to you. This is incredible. I couldn't do that in a million years. I would have so many fights with people. It would be awful. So truly, like, and genuinely, a giant salute to you and the work that you are doing there.
Wow.
So what are some other things that you can do in the Lexington area this very month? And I'm going to hand it over actually to to my co-presenter now, because she is really the person who can tell you how you can get your feet on the ground and your hands in the dirt. Marcia, take it away.
Well, I'll spend a little time, and thank you for this slide you created. Just this month, there's a lot going on. You can learn next week, LexCan is putting on a presentation on Zoom on about sustainability plans for the new high school. Now, this is a very controversial project, and there's a lot of questions about cost, but the things that have to do with sustainability are win-win. And we'll have people to talk to you about, so you could learn more about things like life cycle analysis for heat pumps in the new high school, regardless of what shape or form it takes. We're really working to bring curbside composting at no cost to everyone in the town. We're getting closer and closer to the 4,000 household goal. And you can check in at Black Earth Compost to sign up for a no cost curbside weekly compost pickup. It's easier than you think. We have things that the community farm coming up, which were mentioned earlier. And I really wanted to give a shout out to Sustainability Day at the Lexington Farmers Market on Tuesday, the 17th, from 2 to 6:30 p.m. There'll be the regular farmers and artisans and businesses that make this farmers market so special, but also there'll be 10 to 12 tables for people that are doing this work. Everything from our sustainability and resilience officer for the town, to Black Earth on composting, to learning about solar panels. It's going to be a great day. I'll be there with LexCan. And if you want to learn about all the different things that are coming up each month, LexCan has a newsletter. You can go to lexcan.org and check that out. We also have a great newsletter from Maggie Peard, our Sustainability and Resilience Director. If you go to the town website and look up Sustainability and Resilience Department, you can navigate to her really terrific monthly newsletter and also learn a lot about what the town is doing, which is really impressive. I love the bottom line here, join a local voter project. I think right now, one of the things that makes me anxious is, can we get people elected of any party that will support our future to be a green future where we address climate change? So there's a lot of opportunities there. So let's see. I know oh, thanks Cindy for putting those in the chat.
Can I say
I'm
something about that real quick?
Yes,
Actually,
please.
what Cynthia said?
Yes.
So I noticed that in the chat, Cynthia noted, if you're already signed up for curbside composting, ask your neighbors to sign up. It's no cost,
Yes.
reduces what the town sends to the incinerator. And as I put these things together, that Marcia had told me about, I also tried to point out ways that you could participate in them besides like doing them yourself or doing them by yourself. And that's why I said at the bottom, ask for a ride to the polls. Practice asking for support, help, and company. It is the best climate change survival skill you will ever develop. Especially if you're somebody who's used to having to like white knuckle it and do it all yourself, practice asking for help, any kind of support, any kind of company from anybody who you trust. And if you don't trust anybody, start. That is the thing that is going to help us survive this time well. not just survive it, not just like, ooh, but like really live as well as we can in the challenges that are already here and the challenges that are coming. I also want to just stress that like watching somebody's kids so that they can go to a town meeting is climate action. That is climate action. Even if you are not at the meeting yourself, if you don't like public speaking, if you have a bad leg and can't stand for a long time and can't go on a march, if you, you know, can't like, concentrate on what's being said, pair up with somebody else. Together, you will create climate action through your complementary efforts. It is, if you remember one thing from our conversation tonight, please remember that.
Absolutely. And I'm aware that we want to leave room for people. There we are, questions and discussion. I know a number of people who have found different paths to dealing with climate anxiety, and some of them are straightforward, and some of them are setting their own path. I'd like to start by, having kick off the questions and discussion, and then we'll see where that all goes. So if you have a story you'd like to tell, please put it in the chat. I realize now that I'm not sure how we can recognize people in terms of allowing somebody to speak. I think that may not be something that we can do. Carrie. Yeah, submit stories or a question in the Q&A or chat. Thank you very much, Helen, for that reminder. I might kick this off by talking about a friend who found herself overwhelmed with trying to be a climate leader and trying to, direct traffic in all different organizations and getting people organized for marches, but she found herself overwhelmed. And what was really cool, what I've really appreciated about her, is that she then found ways that didn't feel overwhelming by working with children, by working with pollinator gardens, by talking to people in really meaningful ways. And I feel like she is a role model. At the same time, I know people who have left their work and poured themselves into their climate journey and are the leaders, have the skills to put together presentations, to do public speaking. And they too are, to me, my people I really look up to. There's so many valid ways to go about taking action as a way of lessening or channeling your climate anxiety. Kate, I want to tip to you. I'm looking in I see a picture of you with your husband. Little windmill, that's great.
Yeah, that's out at Block Island. And then
Oh,
this is
beautiful.
the one with the banner. I'm not in that picture, but I was part of that campaign, trying to stop National Grid from building a liquefied natural gas plant in Providence on the south side, where a lot of working people and poor people live, especially people of color, older people, families, people with disabilities, because the rents are low. And the reason the rents are low is because it already sucks to live there. It's already near a bunch of polluting industries. And then they wanted to build one more, and they lost. We lost that. They built it. And I think that like another thing to think about, and another reason to kind of be in touch with your climate emotions and to connect with other people, is so you can handle it when things don't go the way that you know that they should go.
100%.
I would love to hear if people have questions. I'm seeing like some really strong statements in the class. Oh, teenage children with lots of climate anxiety. Any advice for what I can share with them? Yes, probably. But Sally, I would love to know kind of what you all have talked about so far, if you're willing to put that in the chat, because I hate to like tell people to do things that they've already tried and had those things not work. Maybe say like, what form does their climate anxiety take? And then kind of what have you all talked about together so far?
Yeah, I wish we could enable
I know
speaking,
it's
but
a
I
flaw
realize
of question time, is that like often questions give me more questions. Fear of death and doomed future. So, I mean, don't tell them this. But everybody dies. That's the one thing we, you know, some of climate anxiety comes from uncertainty, but the one thing that we know for certain is that all of us who were born, you know, we come into the world and we have to go. And so I think maybe something that it might, if you're willing, something that it might be good to talk with them about is to say, you know, what do you imagine? When you imagine the future, what is it that you imagine? And to invite them to, you know, to get specific with you if they haven't already. And then say, okay, well, if that, you know, I can't promise you that that won't happen, but if that's true, what do you want to do in the meantime? How do you want to live your life now? How do you want to take care of people now? Learn to take care of yourselves now? What is it worth doing now? What is it worth doing in the present and the near future that will help improve the experience of life that you're having?
I like Sally's response. I'd like her to realize that each action helps, even small ones. What's in her control and not her control. And the follow on from Marta, trying to imagine the future for those of us who have kids in our lives and grandchildren, that sense that we need to act now. If we can empower our kids that they can make a difference. And I think, as you say, to live a life where you care for others and allow others to care for you. Those are two really great points, Kate. And it's hard. It's the hardest thing, I think, is when our children are asking us what the heck is going on, or our nieces or nephews or neighbors.
And I think so. Pamela, I see you, and I have a response for you too. But another quick thing about those of us with young people in our lives. I want to put in a little plug for that sustainability fair that Marcia mentioned, and for things like it. If your grandchildren don't live where you live, maybe invite them to visit you at a time that something like that is going on, or see if something like that is going on near where they live. And that can be something that you can experience together. Let them ask those people questions about what's possible and what they can do. Let them get some ideas for all of the ranges of things that we can do, not in the future, the things that we can do in the present, the things that we can do now, the things that we can do in this moment. The people that they will meet at an event like that may have some answers that resonate with them, but I think they will also maybe feel cared for and heard if you invite them to do something together. I'm seeing a suggestion in the chat to plant something together, to get your hands in the dirt. There's another beautiful book. It's called Soil by Camille Dungy. which is a memoir of doing just that with her child in Colorado in like a gravel yard, and how they turned it into a pollinator meadow together. So that could be a cool thing to check out. So Pamela mentioned the idea of driving less, and I'm going to say absolutely 100%. And the way to do that, and I know you all know this, is to agitate for better public transportation. The way to reduce to remember that climate anxiety is a community problem with community solutions. Agitate for rent stabilization so that climate gentrification doesn't make it impossible to live where you live. Agitate for better public transit so that people don't have to drive to get where they need to live and work. This is really like something that, you know, you can be part of, something that you don't have to do by yourself. You don't have to do it all because you're not alone. Those collective solutions that we work on together, Liz is mentioning, like, take teenagers to legislative days, bring them to protest, work in the community garden, getting now those of you who have I teach teenagers, those of you who have teenagers or teach teenagers in your lives know that getting a teenager to do anything is in itself a heroic lift for which you should be celebrated. But you can say to them, hey, this is the thing to do. Come do this thing with me. We can get fries. Other questions that folks have. I'm seeing a lot of really wonderful and positive recommendations in the chat. And I think that's really wonderful because, again, some of these may be things that the people here already know, but others may be new. And now also, you know, the names of other people who are advocating for these things. If you didn't before, you can get together. I want to ask people to think, just in our last couple of minutes, how do you want to use or take away anything that you tried today? And if there's anything that makes you nervous about that, you could also share that too, what the obstacles might be for you. And finally, some of you may already be in touch with one another, but if not, would you like to stay in touch with other people from today?
I don't think the library can share who attends, though if you have it, you see people in the chat that you'd like to meet.
So Mary's asking, do I have any suggestions for dealing with climate anxiety that do not require activism or agitation? Absolutely. Not everybody can add to their plate. That is very real. The grounding exercises and other kind of like ways to stabilize your being, those are totally fine, and you can do them even if they are not the prelude to other collective action. There are many of them. They are out there. Generation Dread by Britt Ray is a great resource. I'll put that in the chat. It's a newsletter, I believe. Sorry, can't type. There's that. That has some resources for other things that you can do. I think also spending time with non-human creatures, spending time with plants, with water, and really focusing on what sensations you're feeling rather than what you know, paying attention to what you feel is really helpful. And there's science that backs that up, that being in connection with the non-human world can actually reduce your climate anxiety and calm you down physiologically. And then finally, I would say, talk about it. Just talk about it. Just be honest. My mom does a thing where if like it's a super warm day in February and somebody at the post office is like, oh, this is beautiful weather, she'll be like, no, actually, it stresses me out. and she'll just tell the truth. There's anxiety that comes from the reality, but then there's like meta anxiety that comes from having to keep it to yourself. Just tell the truth. Don't be alone with it. Somebody might be like, oh man, like, thank you so much for having said it. Other questions or thoughts before we go our ways?
I mentioned in the chat that we will be sending to everyone who signed up follow-up resources. And I think that Helen will also save the chat for us in case there's questions that we didn't catch in the moment. But I really want to thank you so much. We could go on all evening, particularly if we could all talk out loud. Thank you so much, Kate. And for everyone who came this evening, I have so many stories to tell, but for tonight, we will say goodnight, and I think Helen will wrap us up.
Yes,
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Kate and Marcia, for a wonderful program. I'll be sending out a recap with a link to the recording along with the slides that Kate shared and a list of resources as well. I hope you all enjoyed our program tonight, and I thank you all for joining us.